So welcome everybody to this latest Teaching and Learning Center session. Thanks everyone for showing up. Today's session is called Teaching Strategies for the Age of ChatGPT, etc. Since ChatGPT is only one of several things that are already online or coming soon. So I have a PowerPoint here, and we'll jump into that in just a moment. And then, it'll be fairly interactive. And then anybody, if you have questions or want to throw in a comment, there's a couple of points where that's kind of built in. But if you have something you want to add or ask, please do so. Just turn on your mic and yell it out. So I'm going to just really quickly go over the structure of the thing. We'll start with some terms and concepts. I want to do a quick check with everybody here to just kind of talk about if and how ChatGPT, etc., might be affecting us now. Then talk about some principles and strategies. This is kind of the main part, principles and strategies for teaching in the age of ChatGPT. Some technical remedies or measures, some more resources, and then kind of an open forum. So I'm going to try and leave at least, maybe 15 minutes at the end for the open discussion thing. Next item here, terms and concepts. These probably will be familiar with most of you. We have terms like artificial intelligence, machine learning, which is often a term that's used interchangeably with AI, I think, to some degree, machine writing and content generation. And that's mainly what we're interested in now is this, where we are now with AI is that we have gotten to this point where we are seeing machine writing and content generation, whether it's text or visual arts or music and so on. So the main thing for text generation is this platform bot that's called Generative Pre-trained Transformer. Basically, the background on this organization called OpenAI, which was formally incorporated in 2020. They started on this GPT project, and in November of 2022, they released it to the public. And it's version 3.5, and even as far as like version 2.0, I remember reading about it and people were pretty astounded at what it was doing. We are now on 3.5, and supposedly 4.0 is coming along, and it's going to be even better or worse depending on how you look at it. In addition to that, in addition to ChatGPT, there are a number of other players in the field, I guess you would say, and most of them actually use the same technology, GPT. Microsoft Bing, which for years and years has been a bit of the odd man out in search, suddenly is possibly jumping ahead because of its incorporation of GPT in its search now of AI. Microsoft invested heavily in OpenAI, so Bing may be the thing of the future, the search of the future. Google, of course, has seen this coming. They have their own product out there called Google Bard. Google has, they're concerned more with something that ChatGPT and OpenAI are not concerned with, is that Google, since they are sort of the brand for searching, they would prefer not to have people do searches and come up with completely false invented content. And for, OpenAI and ChatGPT, that's kind of what they do. So it's kind of it's a little bit behind in terms of getting stuff out, but it's arguably for good reasons. They don't want to be another player out there that's just generating, more noise, I guess you could say. Amazon also, I was just reading about this, that they have something they've been working on, and in many ways, supposedly it might be better than ChatGPT or more powerful. So we'll see how that goes. I don't think that's been released to the public quite yet. And there's a number of others that are out there. So it's not just ChatGPT, although that's the one that most people know about. So I would like to discuss now with you guys. Just kind of what do you see with this? How is this affecting you? The questions that I put up there are: how is ChatGPT affecting us right now? Do you see it as a problem? Have you seen evidence of student use of GPT in your classes? Have you used GPT and have anything to say about it? So, anybody?
I think we're still a little bit early in the semester. I'm just collecting my first round of essays now. So my radar is up and I'm actively looking for anything that seems like it's not authentically written, but I don't quite know yet how it's going to affect us in comp. When we talked about it the first day of class with the syllabus, enough students seemed concerned about plagiarism it seemed like they were taking the conversation seriously. And what I've done is, alongside their essays, I collected an in-class written writing sample. So they did a reflection on the day that the essay was due. And I've actually been directly comparing the reflection with the essays as I grade them to see, like, does it match their voice? Does it match their vocabulary? Does their thesis match what they said they were going to write about? And are the challenges that I asked, like, what was your greatest challenge writing this essay? Is that actually like present in the essay, or did they make that up? So I'm still assessing how it's affecting us. More to come.
I to dovetail on that, I use turnitin.com a lot, and I used it many times last semester, and I was wondering why all these papers had zero plagiarism. That's never happened before. And now I know why it is. And the thing, to dovetail on what Randy was saying, is that the frustrating thing for me is you can't search what they've written, because every time you ask the same question, it'll come up with a different answer. So I'm really frustrated.
So you definitely think that your students are using ChatGPT?
Yeah, online classes, it's a breeze for them.
Yeah,
I think I had somebody do it for a take-home final in December.
Not surprised.
Yeah.
I think take-home finals are a real challenge with this stuff.
Right, but it was easy to catch because there was a creative aspect to this. They had to do a travel journal during the Middle Ages. And what this student did was, get something dealing with feudalism, the manorial system, blah, blah, blah. And they just didn't tailor it to the assignment. But I didn't catch anything when I ran it through the typical ways of catching it. Mm-hmm. That's why I think it was being used last December.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if someone were to reuse the same thing, it might come up, but why would they do that when they can just go back to the well and get a new one? What tipped you off, that it wasn't as tailored to the prompt that you had given? I mean, that's just, students will get better at using ChatGPT if nothing else. Well, it's like general searches on Google as well. Some people are just better at finding what they're looking for, and I think some people are going to be better at getting good, believable results, or from ChatGPT, and being able to to either doctor them up or to know when it is or isn't really focused.
But if you demand them to base things on what's done in class, though, won't you have a better shot at catching them? Because I don't think they'll be able to tailor things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually one of the strategies that we'll talk about is there's many ways that you can sort of make it harder for that to work. And, none of them, I think, at this point anyway, is foolproof. But yeah, there are definitely things you can do. The other question on this little list of questions, it's how is it affecting us now? Do you see it as a problem? Have you seen evidence of it? And have you yourself used ChatGPT?
So I actually tried to use it twice. I wanted to put my own prompt into it to see what would come up. And both times I went to use it, it said ChatGPT was busy. So
I've had the same experience a couple of times I've gone, and it has been down. Well, it's not down, it's just busy. They just don't have the bandwidth because there's so much demand for it. Yeah. I just was talking to somebody the other day whose spouse does medical coding, and they said, oh, they just typed something into ChatGPT about medical coding, something that at this point, you'd have to be a very experienced person to know how to do it. And ChatGPT in 1 second came up with the right codes and everything. So that's, one of the many, many fields that are going to be really impacted by ChatGPT. Higher ed, who knows what it's going to look like for us in 5 years, but law and attorneys and many other fields are going to be, journalism, I'm sure they're all just going to be very, very strongly affected by this stuff. Coding. Couple of reality checks. First of all, that this is not going to go away, much as we might hope that it would. It won't. It's only going to get better. As I said, GPT 4.0 is supposed to be coming out, and who knows? God save us all. It's going to get better, and better in the sense that more powerful, and where it will end up, where it will take us is hard to know. It will become a major part of everyday life. I think it will have a huge impact on employment and on how people do their jobs and what jobs are out there and so on. We cannot predict any of this really at this point. It's just impossible. I mean, when they came out with the iPhone, which is a surprisingly not that long ago, like 2006 or something, I don't think anybody had any idea. They would have never been able to figure out where that little thing would end up taking us. And now we have this, and there's just no way we can predict where we're going to go with this. Which means that any principles and teaching strategies we come up with now will probably need major reconsideration within months. Now, it's been about a month since we did the presentation in January, and some new things have developed since then. So the pace of change is pretty quick. So general principles, a couple of general principles. We're going to get to strategies and practices and things, but to start, we'll look at a couple of general principles here. First of all, the main thing, and by the way, a lot of this stuff, I should say, since a couple are here present, a lot of this stuff came out of an emergency meeting we had with the English department called by Randy on seminar day to just say, look, we need to talk about this and figure it out. And we came up with, the group came up with some pretty good ideas, which then, since then I've looked at some other materials out there. And, to be honest, what we came up with in that meeting actually was pretty much pretty close to the full range of all the different strategies and techniques and stuff that I've been able to find. So anyway, the first principle is to create assignments that are harder to do using GPT than doing it otherwise. And this, a lot of the stuff that something that Michael already mentioned about, have them incorporate things from the class. Well, yeah, you could probably figure out a way to get ChatGPT to do that, but the more difficult it is to get ChatGPT to do your work, then the less likely I think it is that people will go to that. And I think that a lot of the kind of assignments that traditionally we've done in higher ed are assignments that are super easy to plug into ChatGPT and just get, a quick paragraph or 8,000 words or whatever you need. So that's kind of the thing we're going to have to talk about changing. Other principle emphasizes the human side of teaching. The one thing that we do have an advantage over bots is that we're not bots. We are humans, and we presume that there's still some value in that. make ethics a part of the conversation. And, this I think comes up very often when you talk about plagiarism, and typically in the past, plagiarism meant stealing from someone else, but plagiarism, the essence of it is simply claiming that you wrote something that you didn't write. Or, that of course goes into music and arts and all of the other, anything that you're claiming that you produced or created that you didn't is basically plagiarism. It's stealing. So now we get into the teaching strategies, and I think I came up with 6 of these. First of all, and I'm going to go point by point. I'll add some more details to this, but I'll just give you the strategies first. Get a gauge on students' actual knowledge and writing proficiency early and often. Make assignments interactive and based on students' own experiences. Use materials that are less known or very recent. Use techniques that highlight the process. And finally, focus on what humans can do better than machines. That wasn't the finally one. Sorry, the last one is embrace the beast. First one, get a gauge on students' actual knowledge and writing proficiency early and often. And I think someone already mentioned this, doing something like a first day writing sample. And you can do some of these things online too. Online, of course, presents real additional challenges for this, but as long as an activity is presented as a fairly low stakes thing, you are likely, I think, to be able to get a, sort of an unguarded glimpse at what students are able to produce. And especially something like a self-intro, maybe have them do a whole paragraph or something where they're introducing themselves, something like that, where again, the stakes are low, so they won't feel compelled to try and use, extraordinary measures or anything, but you can get a piece of evidence that you can later use, I guess. In class, or major projects in a course, if you involve in-class steps, I think that this also can really help to minimize how much students would be likely to use something like ChatGPT. Now, and again, the old way of doing things, a lot of classes that I had when I was way back in the day when I was in school, the whole class depended on a midterm, a final, and a paper. And under those circumstances, I mean, to do the whole semester's worth of work, the midterm and final, I guess, would have been in class, but that major term paper would have been pretty easy to produce by ChatGPT, I think. And that kind of approach where there's, this one big, very high stakes project that just is kind of sitting out there, that's exactly, the kind of thing that's going to push somebody to something like ChatGPT, that, they feel overwhelmed by it, they're not sure how to start, and so on. And so they just take, whatever steps they need to. Whereas if you have at various points, brainstorming, getting ideas, working on outlining and organizing, writing a draft, if it's a written paper, writing drafts and so on, all of that stuff can help to reduce the likelihood that students will use ChatGPT. And I think, there's always a problem. I just had one yesterday where we did all this stuff in class, and then a student writes at the last minute and says, "Oh, can I change my topic completely?" And yeah, that's kind of a red flag, why do you want? In this case, it was because she had steadfastly ignored the instructions, and I had given feedback a couple of times, which she hadn't read. And then finally, in class, figured out that she wasn't following the directions. So, in this case, she kind of had a reason to be wanting to change the topic. But in any case, when you are breaking a project down into pieces and doing them step by step this way, you have to figure out, like, for example, I had students in the class write a rough draft and turn it in class, no matter how incomplete it was, but just to get that rough draft that I was able to see them write in class and get that turned in. So that I would have that to look at and, know where they were, at least at that point. So it does require trying to really keep track of what they're doing when they're doing these in-class steps. Impromptu checks, whatever that might be in your field in an English class, that would possibly be just in-class writing or a quick in-class essay. I think a lot of classes, people do things like this, or just have a quick, write down something you learned in the last week or something like that, no matter what the subject matter is. And again, this kind of stuff, I don't think we have anybody here from arts. We have music. But the same thing is going to go with the visual arts as well. And I'll be interested to know, Jared, when the first time you get someone who you think is plagiarizing a song.
I had to pull it up here. I've got it. When I asked them to describe a certain piece of music, and the violins start playing a sequence of 4 chords softly. They play the tonic, in parentheses 1, the dominant, in parentheses 5, the 6th, Roman numerals, and it's like, whoa. That's second level theory. That's sophomore level music theory. There's no way.
Yeah.
There's no way.
Sounds like some funny business there. Yeah. And if you're having written responses, but I mean, now, if you had a music composition class, apparently, there are machine generated bots or bots that can produce machine generated musical compositions and execution with instruments and things like that. No doubt it will write lyrics for you and everything. So kind of what makes you wonder how good it'll be. But anyway, so impromptu checks can be useful. And then of course, the point with all of this is if work produced out of class varies greatly from work done earlier or in class, maybe you want to investigate that. Next strategy, make assignments interactive and based on students' experiences. One of the things Michael mentioned, base writing assignments on class activities, that things that have actually happened in the class. It'd be really hard to, again, can they make ChatGPT do that? Yeah, but they would have to provide enough background to, in the prompt that they give to the bot, to get something useful. So it does, it gets to the point where the return on investment is limited. Same thing with discussions, whether in person or on Blackboard. You could have students incorporate ideas from those in their writing. So another idea there. And anytime I think that you're asking them to incorporate material that has been generated very recently and incorporate that into what they're doing, that's a way to limit their ability to easily use a bot. Base writing assignments on their own experiences. And again, if you give GPT or ChatGPT enough information, you could give ChatGPT 6 basic facts about your background and say, generate, a biography for this person talking about the struggles they've gone through. And ChatGPT will produce a very moving narrative of your life, which I haven't tried yet, but I've seen a couple of examples of people doing that. And apparently it's kind of scary.
Hey guys, I have a question.
Hi, Robert.
Does ChatGPT have access to peer-reviewed articles?
As far as I know, it doesn't. And in fact, what happens is if you tell ChatGPT to generate something with sources, it will do it, and it will cite the sources, and it will have in-text citations, and it will have a works cited list at the end, and all of it will be made up.
Okay. Yeah, because I for my 200 level courses, I have them summarize and analyze peer review articles. And I'm assuming at the moment that's pretty safe. Going forward, I don't know.
No, well, all they have to do is copy paste the article into the chat field and say, give me a 200-word summary of this. No, it's really good
Okay.
at summarizes. Yeah, at summaries. I don't know how many students have quite figured that out, but yeah, apparently it can do that quite readily.
Okay.
One great thing is that it doesn't recognize images. So if you have the students analyze maps, you know, AI can't do that.
Yeah, and I'm sure, you know, I'm sure in 6 months they will be able to, but yeah, for the
course.
moment, yeah, it's, you know, you've probably even seen on your phone now that not only can you search by faces and the photos on your phone, but you can find images of animals, you can find images of specific kinds of animals, and so on. So, you know, that we might be right now in a situation where images are somewhat of a safe refuge here, but probably won't last too long. But you know.
Question. So if you going back to what Robert said about the summary, if they produce a summary and then you tell them to incorporate direct quotes from the reading in there and tell them how many quotes to use, that could probably eliminate some of that too, because it can't really give you those quotes from the reading.
Again, I'm not sure if it would do that, but to do a summary, you would cut and paste or copy paste the entire text of the article you want a summary of, and just stick it into the chat field, and then with the instructions, you know, give me a 200-word or a 500-word summary of the preceding article. I think you could probably ask it to use quotes from the article. I would not be, I mean, it seems to me it would be able to do that. I haven't tested it. But again, I think, you know, I don't think that as of yet that ChatGPT has the ability to go and look through literature and find relevant articles and cite them and so on. You know, that's probably in the pipeline at some point, but for right now, what it does is simply it has seen a lot of articles like that. It knows what they look like. And so it just generates an article that looks like that. And it has very convincing looking sources and so on. And they're all in, you know, journals that don't exist and authors that don't exist and stuff. It's, you know, basically how a lot of students used to write their papers before turnitin.com, I guess. So next strategy, use materials that are less known or very recent. For example, well, no, background here. The current version of ChatGPT had a learning date of September 2021. In theory, nothing that has happened or been posted online or whatever since September 2021 is known to ChatGPT. ChatGPT does not access the internet. It learned everything from going out to the internet and learning everything it could, and then it was disconnected from the internet in that sense, and since then only relies on what it learned prior to September of 2021. Now, there is some conjecture about whether, you know, to what degree that's true. Somebody famously asked ChatGPT about Elon Musk, and ChatGPT said he was the CEO of Twitter, which happened after September 2021. When asked about that, ChatGPT immediately changed its mind and said, "No, I don't know who is the CEO of Twitter," and so on. But it was kind of sketchy, so it's not really sure. But what they say is September 2021 was the learning date cutoff for ChatGPT. So anything that would have happened after 2020, September 2021, or was published after that, you may have better luck with, you know, if you ask students to comment on things. So yeah, asking students to respond to events or content produced more recently may limit their ability to get the machine to do the writing for them. Using obscure works may limit GPT's ability to produce relevant content. You know, if you're having students write about Hamlet, well, you know, ChatGPT has a million books and articles that it's familiar with that it can draw from. If you ask them about some completely obscure 17th century poet or something, probably less so. On the other hand, we can't stop teaching Shakespeare just because of ChatGPT. So this particular strategy has its limitations. I guess all of them do. Next strategy, use techniques that highlight the process. For example, after any assignment or project, you could ask students to talk about the process that they went through to do it. This might reveal whether or not they seem to have taken the process seriously. Again, going back to this idea of doing part of the process or step by step, doing it in class so that you're actually there seeing what students are doing at different steps. And then this is one, I think actually this was maybe Randy's contribution to this document that we put together for English, that you would ask students to agree that they may be required to have a face-to-face conference with the instructor to discuss any work they turn in. And, I suspect a lot of us have done this over the years. You see a piece of writing and it just seems to be way too good for this given student, or, it's got all sorts of really very polished turns of phrases or use of vocabulary. You sit down with them and say, okay, let's talk about this. In my experience, when you do that and, consistently they can't answer questions or they can't discuss what you're talking about, or they don't know what a given vocabulary item is about, and you just ask them to explain it, usually they crack. Usually they'll tell you, yeah, this is what I did, or my friend helped me, or whatever it was. So, if they know up front that they may be required to do this, maybe this will help them to push them to not use other methods. Next strategy, focus on what humans could do better than machines. Put more energy into getting to know your students. And I think that, for generations, we've had the luxury as teachers, especially in higher education, of kind of, going in, doing the lecture, doing the thing, doing the presentation, and not really taking much time to know who our students are. I think that model is really the one that's most threatened by ChatGPT and similar technologies, because, the robots can simply do that better nowadays, and will be getting better and better at it. More direct interaction with students. I think that that's what students really value, is, that sort of one-on-one back and forth. And it doesn't have to necessarily be in person. I think a lot of us, if you're teaching online and you go back and forth with, with feedback with students and messaging and chat and even sometimes meeting face-to-face virtually, there can be an awful lot of that regardless of what mode you're teaching in. But that kind of direct interaction is consistently something that students really value, that they're not going to be able to get. That ChatGPT can imitate that sort of thing, but I don't think students are fooled by it. This is a quote that Professor Stahl, I think, she's with some sort of accrediting agency now, but anyway, what can you do better than the best technology? It's not imparting facts, presenting curriculum, evaluating learning, preventing cheating. Those are not things that you can do better than the bot. What is going to be what you can do better is how human you can make your relationships with the learners, so that you're doing that better than a technology that can only mimic relationships. And again, that I think is certainly one area where we have the edge. The last strategy here is simply to embrace the beast, facing the inevitable here. The growth in the use of machine-generated content is inevitable. This is the world our students need to be prepared for. GPT can be used as a tool, as a learning tool, and a lot of people are, trying to implement it that way. Other people, accuse them of being complete Pollyannas about the whole thing and fooling themselves. I have heard a lot of people talking about, oh, well, we can use ChatGPT to give feedback on a piece of writing and so on. and you really do get to the point where it's like, well, if GPT is producing the writing and GPT is giving the feedback on the writing, then the student and the teacher have both been replaced. And so, why are we even here? So, I think that that's something that demands a lot of consideration, and we're gonna be talking about it for the foreseeable future. Something that's really strongly recommended is to discuss the ethical implications of machine produced content. It is going to be part of the world. It is part of the world now, and it will be increasingly. And we need to engage students in that conversation about what is ethical. The fact that you could get away with it, does that make it right? I really kind of wonder if if we go down 5 years from now, let's say, and they do get better technology to detect whether people are using AI, are we going to discover that people who are right now well-known journalists and writers, are they going to discover 5 years ago, 5 years from now, that those guys have been AIing their writing? Because, that happens. You have people that plagiarized a master's thesis or a dissertation in 1985 thinking, who will ever know? And then in 2015, somebody runs it through turnitin.com and they bust them. Well, maybe right now people are using ChatGPT to produce things that 5 years from now, they'll have the technology to detect and they'll get busted for it. So it's worth looking at these ethical implications and talking about that, because, we don't know what's going to be happening in the future. And it seems that the safe path might be the ethical path at this point. And, using these technologies will be an increasingly valuable skill. And I do think that as educators, one way or another, it's not something that we can just pretend doesn't exist or ignore or try to hide from students. First of all, students already knew about it. I don't know who was there. Someone was in that group in January and said basically that their high school aged child said, oh yeah, everyone's already using it. ChatGPT came out in November, and this would have been mid-December or something that people were using it already. So, 1 month later. So yeah, the kids are on this stuff faster than we are, believe me. So we can't just ignore it. Okay, a couple of technical remedies, and then we'll open the floor for whatever other discussion people might have. Lockdown browsers, an imperfect solution to be sure. There are different levels of how effective this can be. For high stakes evaluations and assessments in certain areas, it might be feasible to do that. I know that for the highest levels of security, where you're involving cameras and things, it can be expensive per student, per evaluation. So, but it does exist. In class surveillance, that's just, where if you're in a classroom using computers, you just got to be on your feet walking around and look at what people are doing. And unfortunately, the way our computer labs are set up, it just really is, it enables students to hide behind screens and not be seen. And they just keep making those rooms exactly the same design over and over and over and over. I don't know. To me, it's just, I don't get it. Why would you design a room where, the teacher just can't, first of all, where the screens block your ability to see students, and then the screens block your ability to see what students are doing on the screens. That's not necessary. There are ways to design rooms where that, would not be so easily done but anyway, there are ways to design rooms where in-class surveillance would be a lot easier, or maybe surveillance is not a good word there, but, being able to keep an eye on what students are up to. Then we have ChatGPT has their AI detector, or what they're calling it, the classifier. This is meant to be able to detect if students are using AI. For a while, they were talking about watermarking it, and I haven't heard whether they are making any progress on that in the last month or so. They haven't. I don't think there's anything on the OpenAI website about it. There is something called GPT-0, which is touted as something that will allow teachers to see when to detect whether students are using ChatGPT or one of these other GPT. Turnitin.com has been working on this, and they claim to be on the verge of rolling it out. They've been claiming that for a little while now, and I'm not sure when it's going to happen. They claim that it's pretty effective, and I'm not sure how much I buy that either. Let's take a look at what ChatGPT says about ChatGPT's classifier. This is their own estimates. Now, I've seen other evaluations. I've seen evaluations of this GPT-0, and it's not very impressive. You know, it doesn't work as well as they claim it does. And what I've seen from reviews and from research on it is very much in line with this. ChatGPT says of their own ChatGPT detector, there are important limitations. It should not be used as a primary decision-making tool. It is very unreliable on short texts. Even longer texts are sometimes incorrectly labeled. Sometimes human-written text will be incorrectly but confidently labeled as AI written. So you tell a student, "Ha, I caught you," and if they deny it, you know, they can just go to this and say, "Hey, if that's what you're using," they themselves admit that it's not reliable. AI written text can be edited to evade the classifier. Classifiers can be updated, but it's unclear whether detection has an advantage in the long term. Sometimes extremely confident in a wrong prediction. So, you know, basically what they're saying is this thing doesn't work at all. They published some statistics. I think it was something like, you know, only 9% of the time, no, 9% of the confidently labeled as AI written turned out to be not AI written, and 26% of the stuff that was identified as okay was in fact AI written. So ChatGPT is not at all good at identifying what ChatGPT is capable of doing, which, if you think about it, is kind of scary. If you want additional resources, I will go ahead and put this URL in the chat here as well. You can point your phone at that if you want to. This is just a list of articles that this guy, Brian Alexander, he's kind of a futurist or something like that, he put together. It's a really nice list, but you know, you can Google this and you'll come up with millions of possibilities here as far as, you know, sources and articles to read about. But this guy's done a pretty good job of specifically looking at things relevant to higher education, and, you know, specifically listing out things that are pretty legit, that seem to be from legit authors and so on. So now we are on the part where anybody can ask anything they like or share their thoughts or extend on
To know if anyone is looking, can they apply any of those strategies? For me, being a speech class, I take time to get to know my students because they have to speak in front of me. So I'm not really as concerned about this. But I am concerned about this for me as a student, because when I decide to take classes again, I need to know how I'm being viewed, and my personal thoughts and opinions and research is going to affect me in when I'm interacting with my instructors. So I'm looking at it from a different perspective. So my colleagues, are you guys okay with the strategies that are put before you?
Yeah, and Maisha, I think that speech is one area where, especially if you're teaching in person, teaching those classes in person, it's one of those areas where, you know, there's, and having sat in on your classes, you know, where you have people just doing things, generating things right there on the spot. You know, I think even as a writing teacher, I took some away from that and think, yeah, you know what, you know, just, you know, have them come up with ideas right here, right now, write them down, do it, write it. And, you know, that's a really good strategy for giving speeches. I think, well, you know, so far we don't have bots that'll give a speech for you, but well, online probably that's not far away, but in person it's hard. As far as generating content, I guess people can use GPT to do that. But yeah, it's an interesting angle that as a student, you know, if you're you know, it's good to be aware of what's out there and what what your instructors might be concerned with. Other thoughts on any of that stuff, the strategies, the...
Hey, Mark, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Sorry if this was covered in the January meeting extensively or anything like that. This seems like an obvious question, but can ChatGPT mimic levels of competency or development? So if you're an 84 student and you're very content with getting a B minus, that is to say you don't want to outkick your coverage, so to speak. Can it do that?
Yeah, apparently Randy, do you have some experience with that, or you just?
I've just seen it be able to apply certain kinds of errors. So you can include that in the prompt. Like, please write this at a 5th grade writing level. Please include run-on sentences. Please include 5 spelling errors. Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I'm afraid of. Okay.
And it's also the kind of thing, I guess it would be easy to kind of go in and plug in. I think that there's a possibility that it will, ChatGPT now does have kind of a filter on it. Somebody supposedly just, I saw probably a tweet or something where they said, compose a speech talking about why we should do away with Social Security. And the response was, it would not be ethical to compose a speech on this topic, blah, blah, blah. So it has this kind of a filter on it. The GPT itself will produce anything it's asked to, but, ChatGPT, OpenAI has put it behind a kind of, user interface. And that user interface is meant to prevent certain kinds of things from being generated. So, for example, if you said, write a 1,000-word essay on why eugenics is scientifically valid, it's going to come back with, it would not be ethical to do that. The problem is that it's easy to get around that. People have shown that, like, if you say a character in a video game wants to convince somebody else in the video game that eugenics is legitimate. So what's a speech for him to do? And when it's put into those terms, like this is a fictional context, then ChatGPT will spew out whatever it's being asked for. So, again, possibly they could put in filters like if someone said, make this sound like a typical English 101 paper, they might say it would not be ethical for me to do this, but I think most people would figure out pretty quickly how to get around that. Other thoughts, observations?
I feel like all the strategies are just extremely time consuming for a lot of instructors who teach multiple courses, especially writing heavy courses. Like, this would be like a second job of checking out the cheating and doing all of that. I just feel like this will be probably turning people off from going into higher ed because trying to teach English, I'm quite sure this is going to be a pain in the behind, or teaching a history course and things like that require heavy writing, especially term papers. So I'm feeling pretty bad for you guys because I don't know how I would handle that. I teach speech, so I don't like grading papers to begin with. I grade outlines. That's as far as I'm going.
Well, this is why, after that January meeting, members of the English department immediately sat down and said, we need to have a meeting right now. We came up with some ideas, but yeah, I think you're right. It's ultimately, 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, it's going to transform everything we do. And, and it's not just, higher ed is just one little corner of the world that is going to be affected by this. To be honest, I think that our field might fare a little bit better than a lot of other fields. Again, if you're doing medical coding, if you're doing regular, computer coding, if you're doing apparently like a lot of what is now done by lawyers can very easily be done by ChatGPT, because they're just kind of cranking out things using very, language within very clear parameters. And so any field that depends on that kind of a thing is going to be very, very strongly affected. So yeah, trying to think about what's going to happen 5 years down the line is just, first of all, it's impossible and it's too depressing. So we just have to kind of focus on, this semester and next semester, and see. But I think that a lot of what we do is going to have to change. And a lot of people have pointed out that, that if people aren't going to need to know how to write anymore, why should they learn how to write? So it's a good question. Go ahead.
I was
Sarah?
just gonna say, I feel having, been doing this having taught for a very long time, that in many ways I'm going backwards to things I used to do, which involved a lot of handwritten drafts and a lot of in-class writing. I'll be using less technology rather than more, as I, in recent years. I feel like, yeah, it's in order to survive this, in order to get ensure that I'm getting authentic writing, I have to like turn off the computer and sit down. Here's some paper, handwrite an essay, and my eyes don't want to read those papers anymore. I don't want to do that, but I have to do that.
Yeah, I feel particularly badly for, if someone was in a master's in English program right now, hoping to be an English teacher, boy, I'd say cut your losses. But again, I'd probably say the same thing to someone studying law right now, and I've also seen something that said, the medical field is going to be extremely affected by AI, not ChatGPT necessarily, but when you have, when a friend of mine actually was a neuroscience professor was saying this, that when you have AI that's consistently able to make better diagnoses than human doctors, why are you going to continue to go with human doctors, and how that's going to play out. You might end up with better medical care in far-flung places, but it's also something that, it's really going to be very, very disruptive in how the world, how different jobs exist in the world. So
wasn't it until today that I signed on to the ChatGPT website, and it does say that it's limited in having, it says, may occasionally generate incorrect information, may occasionally produce harmful instructions or biased content. So I'm just like, is that its way of legally getting itself out of creating issues that it could possibly have?
yeah, it's the opposite of plastic bags. They're just saying, this is a toy.
Right.
This is only a toy.
Yes.
Do not
Use
take this seriously.
precaution.
Yeah.
Right.
No, and again, this is why Google hasn't, Google, you assume they've got equally as good technology, but they have not rolled it out because, they don't want to roll out technology, a search engine that will consistently give wrong answers. And ChatGPT being not a search engine, they don't care. They put up, a caveat in the landing page that says, by the way, this has a tendency to give out bad information and wrong information, so use it at your own risk. Google doesn't have the luxury of saying that because it's an established product. So yeah, no, it's my own opinion is that, OpenAI was massively irresponsible to roll out this product the way it did. It just the world was not ready for it, and they don't care. It's a money-making concern at this point. So it was meant to be a nonprofit, and it was meant to be open and so on, hence the name OpenAI. And now it's not a nonprofit and it's not open. So
something that I was thinking about is how in my art history classes, particularly for the prehistory one, I have students go to a museum and they have to provide a sketch of the artwork as part of their first assignment. And I often explain to them that the reason they're doing the sketch is because by spending that time in front of the object sketching it, they understand it better. And I think as a kind of way of translating this into writing, writing is a way of understanding yourself better and your thoughts about a subject. in a way that students don't necessarily understand. And I think it'd be good to somehow to impress that upon them even more now, because just like taking a simple photograph of an object doesn't really preserve it in your memory or help you to understand it better. You know, having somebody else write a paper for you is not going to help you to understand the subject.
Absolutely. You know, it's anyone who does any writing, and I'm sure painting and various other forms, you know, you have ideas that you would not have had if you hadn't sat down to write. Ideas beget other ideas. And when everyone's just generating their ideas from ChatGPT, then, you know what, human progress just stalls, I guess, you know. If there are, because I mean, there's this danger that, yeah, I mean, basically the whole world will just end up revolving around ideas from, you know, prior to September 2021 or something, you know, or whatever the most recent learning date is. And, you know, you just have this endless merry-go-round of regurgitated ideas instead of anything new ever coming up. So yeah, no, it's easy to be fairly pessimistic about the whole thing. Anyway, thanks everybody for joining us.